December 1st arrived in Oakbridge not with a whisper, but with a meteorological statement of intent. The sky, which had been threatening a leaden gray since Thanksgiving, finally broke, letting fall a silent, thick snowfall that covered the cobblestones of Main Street with a layer of frozen cotton. For most of Oakbridge's inhabitants, snow meant hot chocolate, snowball fights, and the perfect excuse to be late for work. For Eleanor Vance, it meant she had to shovel her shop's entrance every 2 hours if she wanted to maintain the impeccable aesthetic that characterized her business. Eleanor, 43 years old, Capricorn rising in "Don't Touch My Books," stood behind the counter of the Oak Inkwell. Her shop wasn't simply a bookstore, it was a temple. It smelled of a sacred blend of wood beeswax, old vanilla, that scent pages give off when lignin breaks down, strong black tea, and the subtle perfume of lavender that Eleanor wore behind her ears. Before we continue with this story, just a quick reminder that if you enjoy cozy romantic stories you can listen to at a relaxed pace, you can subscribe. So there will always be a new story waiting for you. There were no fluorescent lights in the inkwell. Only banker-style lamps with green glass shades, brass candelabras, and the natural light fighting to enter through the Victorian glass of the window display. The silence was dense, respectful, almost ecclesiastical. Perfect. Silence is the sound of intelligence thinking. Or at least, the sound of no one bothering me. Eleanor adjusted her reading glasses and looked out at the street through the window. There he was.
The enemy, right across the street.
Exactly 12.5 meters away. Eleanor had measured it with her steps. Stood page 0. If the inkwell was a cathedral, page 0 was a nightclub for people who read comic books. It had neon lights blinking in the window in the shape of speech bubbles. It had posters in garish primary colors announcing open mic night and zine workshop. And, worst of all, it had an industrial espresso machine whose hum and smell of burnt beans crossed the street, invading neutral territory. The enemy's door opened at that moment. He came out, Julian, 31 years old. Gemini, which explained his duality between being irritatingly handsome and professionally chaotic. Brown hair always messy, as if he had just taken off a motorcycle helmet or rolled around in a pile of dry leaves.
He was wearing an ironic Christmas sweater, bright red,
with a Santa Claus surfing and Converse sneakers that were definitely not appropriate for the snow. Julian took out a shovel to clear his entrance. But he didn't do it with Eleanor's military efficiency, he did it dancing. Yes, dancing.
He was wearing large headphones and moving his hips to the rhythm of some music that, thank God, Eleanor couldn't hear.
At one point, Julian looked up. Their eyes met across the 2 window displays and the snowy street.
He smiled.
It wasn't a polite, neighborly smile. It was a 1,000-watt smile, dazzling, dimples included. He took off one headphone, waved his gloved hand in an exaggerated gesture, and shouted something the glass muffled, but Eleanor knew how to read on his lips. "Happy December, neighbor." Eleanor felt a twitch in her left eyelid. "Hemingway," she said, without looking away from the man dancing with a shovel. "The neighbor is being excessive again. It's exhausting. How can anyone have that much serotonin at 9 in the morning? It's unnatural." From the maroon velvet armchair reserved for feline management, Hemingway, a gray Persian cat with the flattest and angriest face in the northern hemisphere, emitted a sound that was halfway between a hiss and an existential sigh.
"I'm with you, Cat."
Youth is a disease that cures with time, but in the meantime, it's very loud. Eleanor turned to go back to organizing the stack of Jane Austen first editions, trying to ignore the fact that Julian had rather broad shoulders under that ridiculous sweater. The doorbell rang. Not the soft jingle Eleanor preferred, but an urgent clatter. Mayor Miller entered. A short woman, wearing a faux fur coat that looked like a polar bear, and an energy that made Eleanor want to hide under the counter. "Eleanor, dear, the pride of Oakbridge," the mayor shouted, shaking off the snow like a wet dog. "What a divine smell. It smells of wisdom and furniture wax. I love it." "Good morning, Mayor," Eleanor said, forcing a smile. "How can I help you? Are you looking for the book on the history of the local sewage system you asked for?" "I already have it reserved." "Oh, no, dear, that can wait. I'm here for something much more important. Vital, Christmas, why?" The mayor approached the counter, invading Eleanor's personal space with a smell of gardenia perfume that was too strong. The Christmas Eve literary gala, she announced, as if she were proclaiming a nation's independence. Eleanor relaxed a little. Ah, of course, like every year. I already have my reading prepared, a passage from Dickens, sober, traditional. And I've selected the wine. Well, double quote, the mayor made a face. About that. The committee has been thinking. We've been doing the same thing for 10 years, Eleanor. Red wine, Dickens readings, tomb-like silence. It's elegant, yes, but young people are going to the next town over to watch the elf karaoke contest. We need life. We need fusion. Eleanor felt a cold knot in her stomach. The word fusion never brought anything good. In cooking, it meant putting pineapple on things that shouldn't have pineapple, and in literature it meant disaster. Fusion, she repeated warily. Yes, tradition and modernity. The past and the future shaking hands under the cultural mistletoe. So I've made an executive decision. The mayor pointed with a manicured finger toward the other side of the street. Toward page 0. You and Julian. You're going to co-organize the event. Together, in the town hall ballroom. Eleanor's world stopped. What? She asked, hoping she had misheard. Julian? The boy who sells comics of people in tights and serves oat-milk lattes. Maya, with all due respect, our styles are incompatible. He is neon. I am candlelight. He is noise. I am silence.
He is cos.
He is charming and attracts the under 35s, Eleanor. And you have the credibility and the good wine. You are the perfect team. You have 2 weeks. I want decoration, joint readings, and something that keeps people from falling asleep before 12. But No buts. It's a municipal order. And besides, I've already told him and he's delighted. He said it seemed like a fascinating challenge to work with a local legend. Local legend? That's code for Old Glory. I'm 43, not 90, damn it. Mayor, I'm counting on you. The woman turned and shot out the door. And make sure there's mistletoe. People love romance at Christmas. Bye. The door closed, leaving Eleanor alone with the echo of the catastrophe. The door closed, leaving Eleanor alone with the echo of the catastrophe. She looked through the window. Across the street, Julian had stopped shoveling snow. He was looking at her. He saw her through the glass. Slowly, he gave her 2 thumbs up as a sign of victory and winked. Damn it, Eleanor murmured, sinking onto her Victorian stool. Hemingway, we are at war. And I'm afraid the enemy has better weapons. He has enthusiasm. Hemingway didn't even open his eyes. Eleanor spent the next 24 hours in a state of denial worthy of a psychological study. She tried to convince herself that the mayor would call to say it was a joke. She tried to convince herself that she could organize the gala alone and Julian would simply set up the speakers. But when she received an email from Julian with the subject line, "Galactic proposals for the gala" and rocket emojis, she knew there was no escape. They agreed to meet on neutral ground. Eleanor refused to set foot in page 0. I don't want my clothes to smell like burnt beans and millennial desperation, and refused to let him enter the Inkwell. Hemingway is very sensitive to chaotic energies. So there they were, on a bench in Oakbridge Central Park, at 2 degrees below zero. Eleanor arrived 5 minutes early, dressed in a black wool coat, leather gloves, a gray cashmere scarf, and a leather folder with a yellow notepad and a fountain pen. She sat down, crossed her legs, and waited, radiating disapproval. Julian arrived 2 minutes late. He came on a bicycle, skidding on the snow. He was wearing a military green parka, a striped, colorful scarf that looked knitted by a colorblind grandmother, and a backpack full of patches. "Good morning, partner in crime,"
he said, getting off the bike and leaning it against a tree.
He carried 2 steaming cardboard cups in a holder. "You're late," Eleanor said, looking at her wristwatch. "I arrive with style," he corrected, sitting next to her without asking. The bench creaked. "And I arrive with peace offerings." He extended one of the cups. Eleanor looked at it with suspicion, as if it contained anthrax or, worse, instant coffee. "I don't drink coffee from your shop, Julian. I've already told you. I'm a tea purist." "I know," he said, smiling. He had a lopsided smile, the kind that suggests he knows a secret you don't. "That's why this isn't coffee. It's an Earl Grey with double bergamot, a splash of skim milk, and an almost imperceptible touch of lavender syrup." Eleanor froze. Her hand, halfway to rejecting the cup, stopped in the air. That is ... exactly my order. My specific, complicated, and pedantic order that I make at Mrs. Higgins' cafe on Sundays. How does he know? She looked him in the eyes. They were a bright hazel color, with green specks, looking at her with an attention that made her feel strangely exposed. How? She started to ask. I have my sources, he said, winking. And I also have ears. Mrs. Higgins talks very loudly. Take it. It's burning hot, and your nose is red from the cold. It suits you. You look like a character from a Russian novel, but I prefer you not to freeze before we approve the budget. Eleanor took the cup. The heat filtered through her leather gloves, an immediate relief against the biting cold. She took a cautious sip. It was perfect, irritatingly perfect. Thank you, she said dryly, trying to regain her composure. But this doesn't buy my vote for putting disco lights at the gala. Curses, my master plan has failed. Julian pulled a tablet out of his backpack. I've been thinking, Eleanor. I know you hate my ideas before hearing them, but give me a chance. The gala is about stories, right? It's about literature, she corrected. About the written word. Exactly, but stories change formats. I thought we could divide the hall, your side, the classic salon. Leather armchairs, warm light, reading aloud. My side, the future. Interactive screens, graphic novels, a spoken word corner. And in the middle, the bridge. The bridge? Eleanor raised an eyebrow. Literally. We build a small decorative bridge out of books. Old and new books mixed together. To show that it's all the same story. Eleanor looked at the sketch he had made on the tablet. It wasn't a childish drawing. It was a fairly professional 3D render. The concept ... doesn't horrible. In fact, the book bridge was an idea she might have had herself if she weren't so busy hating modernity. The bridge ... is acceptable, she conceded. But no purple lights, and no techno music. I want a string quartet. How about a soft jazz trio? He negotiated. It's classic but doesn't make people sleepy. Jazz, Eleanor considered. Only if it's instrumental. No singers improvising. Deal. Julian gently bumped his cardboard cup against hers. See, it wasn't that hard. I'm not the literary antichrist, Eleanor. I'm just a guy who thinks Batman has the same psychological complexity as Hamlet. Eleanor almost choked on her tea. Take that back right now. Think about it. Both are rich, orphans, obsessed with revenge, wear black, and have dramatic internal monologues. They are the same person. Eleanor had to bite the inside of her cheek not to smile. The comparison was absurd, but technically not incorrect. You are impossible, Julian, and you are fascinating when you aren't trying to incinerate me with your gaze. By the way, double quotes. He leaned a little closer, invading her personal space just enough for her to smell his perfume, paper, coffee, and something clean like shaving soap. You have a snowflake caught in your eyelashes. Right there. He raised his hand. Eleanor stopped breathing. For a second, she thought he was going to brush it away. She felt the heat of his hand near her face. Her heart, treacherous and stupid, skipped a beat. But Julian lowered his hand and smiled. Make a wish before it melts, he whispered. Eleanor blinked, and the flake disappeared. I wish this would end quickly. I wish I hadn't noticed how pretty his eyes are. I wish my tea weren't so good. We have work to do, she said, opening her folder abruptly to break the moment. Show me the reading list. And if I see Harry Potter, I'm leaving, Julian laughed, and the sound was warmer than the tea. 3 days remained until the gala and disaster was imminent. Or at least that's what Eleanor felt. They were in the town hall basement, a place that smelled of dust, humidity, and stale bureaucracy. The mayor had given them permission to look for historical decorations in the archive. Outside, a snowstorm had decided to cancel the rest of the world. The wind howled against the basement skylights. Eleanor was standing on a wooden stepladder that seemed to have survived the Civil War, trying to reach a box labeled Golden Garlands 1980. Be careful, Julian said from below. He was holding the ladder with both hands, looking up with concern. That ladder shakes more than a flan in an earthquake. Let me go up. I can do it, Julian, Eleanor huffed, stretching. I've been climbing library ladders since practically before you were born. My balance is legendary. Ouch, low blow on the age. I like it when you bring out the claws, Eleanor, but seriously, come down. If you fall and break a hip, The gala is cancelled, and I'll have to read Dickens alone. And I'll do it with a robot voice to get revenge. Eleanor managed to grab the box. Got it. See, I don't need ... Well, quotes at that precise instant. The universe decided to intervene. There was a loud snap, like an electric whip, and then absolute darkness. The lights went out. The basement was plunged into a blackness so dense you could chew it. Ah! Eleanor, startled by the sudden blackout, took a false step on the ladder. She felt the void under her foot. She dropped the box. She fell. But she didn't hit the ground. She felt strong arms, very strong, catching her in midair. The impact knocked the wind out of her lungs. She collided with a solid, warm body. They heard the noise of the box hitting the floor and scattering garlands, but Eleanor was safe, feet dangling inches from the floor, clinging to Julian's shoulders. "I've got you," he said. His voice sounded hoarse, very close to her ear. Eleanor was trembling. She could feel Julian's heart beating fast against her chest. She could feel the strength of his arms around her waist and thighs. The smell of coffee and rain enveloped her completely. "Put me down," she whispered, though she didn't let go. Julian deposited her on the ground with care, but didn't remove his hands from her waist immediately. In the dark, the intimacy was overwhelming. "Are you okay?" he asked. Yes, I'm okay, just ... What a scare. Julian took out his phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam of white light illuminated their faces from below, creating dramatic shadows. They were very close, too close. Eleanor could see the gold flecks in his eyes, could see a small scar on his chin she had never noticed. "The door," Julian said, turning toward the exit. He went and pushed the heavy metal door. Nothing. "It's an electronic security lock. Without electricity, it locks automatically. Reverse fire protocol or something." "We're locked in." "Great." Eleanor let herself fall onto a pile of old rugs. "Trapped in a freezing basement with my nemesis, no signal and no lights. It's the start of a horror novel. Or a very bad romantic comedy." Julian sat next to her, leaving the phone on the floor so the light would bounce off the wall and create softer ambient lighting. "I prefer the romantic comedy," he said. "At least in those they usually eat pizza at the end." He pulled an energy bar from his pocket, broke it in half and offered her a piece. "Gala dinner. It's oats and dark chocolate. Almost gourmet." Eleanor accepted the piece. They ate in silence for a moment, listening to the wind howl outside. The cold was starting to seep in. Unconsciously, they moved a little closer to each other, seeking body heat. "Why?" Eleanor asked suddenly, looking at the shadow of her own hands on the wall. "Why did you open page 0 right in front of me?" Julian stopped chewing. "Excuse me?" "There are 1,000 empty spaces in Oakbridge. Cheaper spaces, bigger ones, closer to the university area. But you chose the one across the street, right in front of my window. Did you want to sink me? Did you want to prove that the old ways are useless?" Julian let out a soft laugh, humorless. "Sink you? God, Eleanor, you have no idea, do you?" He turned toward her. The phone light reflected the seriousness on his face. "The Oak Inkwell is an institution. No one can sink you. You are the queen of books in this county." "I opened across the street because I wanted to learn from you. I arrived in this town 2 years ago, looking for a place to start from scratch after a complicated life in the city. I walked into your shop on a Tuesday afternoon. It was raining. You were recommending a book to a little girl. I think it was Matilda. You spoke to her with such passion, with such respect. You didn't treat her like a silly child. You treated her like a reader. I saw you wrap the book. I saw you smile at her. I thought, I want to do that. I want to have that passion. But in my own way." Julian lowered his gaze, playing with a loose thread on his scarf. "I opened across the street to keep the bar high. To watch you work. To remind myself every morning that excellence exists. I didn't want to compete with you, Eleanor. I wanted to be your neighbor. I don't know, maybe one day you cross the street and like what I do." Eleanor felt her heart shrink. All her defenses, all her Capricorn walls built brick by brick, began to crack. "Okay, I take back the nemesis thing. He's an admirer. A handsome, young, competent admirer who just confessed he uses me as a business muse in the darkness of a basement. What do I do with this?" What do I do with the fact that my heart is beating so loud I'm afraid he'll hear it? I thought you hated me, she admitted with a small voice. Because of my death glares at your window. Because of how I judge your music. Your death glares are adorable, he said, smiling again. You crinkle your nose like an angry rabbit. And you move your glasses compulsively? It's hypnotic. I am a 43-year-old woman, Julian. I am not adorable. I am formidable. I am a serious businesswoman. You are both, he said, very serious. Julian reached out and covered her hand, which rested on her knee. His hand was big, hot, full of calluses. Eleanor's hand was freezing. My hands are cold, she whispered, trying to pull away. I have heat to spare, he said, interlacing his fingers with hers. He didn't let go. They stayed like that, shoulder to shoulder, hand in hand in the dark, while the cold of the basement stopped mattering. They talked about books. For real, not business. They talked about why reading saves us. Julian told her about his loneliness in the city. Eleanor told him about her divorce and how books never abandoned her. When 2 hours later the lights came back on with a hum and the lock clicked, Eleanor felt a pang of disappointment. She didn't want to leave there. She didn't want to go back to being the rival. Are you feeling the tension in that basement? If you love stories where opposite poles don't just attract, but complement each other, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to see how this literary Christmas Eve ends and tell me, are you team classic like Eleanor or team modern like Julian? The following days were a blur of frenetic activity, but something had changed. The Cold War was over. The mistletoe alliance had begun. To optimize time, they started working together in the shops. To optimize time. Julian crossed enemy lines. He entered the Oak Inkwell with his laptop and his vibrant energy. Eleanor expected Hemingway, her Persian cat and guardian of the threshold, to attack him. Hemingway hated everyone. He had hissed at bishops and scratched councilmen. But when Julian entered and crouched down, offering his hand for him to smell, Hemingway simply sniffed him, rubbed against his jeans and purred. Traitor, Eleanor whispered from the counter. I'm selling you out for a bag of cheap kibble. I have a gift with animals, Julian said, scratching the cat's chin. And I brought butter brioche in my pocket. Bribery helps. They worked side by side. Eleanor discovered that Julian was incredibly organized for a walking chaos. He had spreadsheets, with colors, for the music and timing. And Julian discovered that Eleanor had a dry, sarcastic sense of humor that made him laugh out loud. There were moments of danger. Moments where Julian was up a ladder in Eleanor's shop fixing a burnt-out bulb, and she stood watching his back and stretched arms, completely forgetting what she was doing. Moments where Eleanor read a poem aloud to him that she had selected for the gala, and when she looked up, she found Julian looking at her with an intensity so raw, so full of desire and admiration that she had to stop reading because she ran out of air. You read incredibly, he said, with a low voice. You have a voice that I could listen to all day. It's practice, she stammered, closing the book abruptly. Years of reading stories to children. I don't feel like a child when I listen to you, Eleanor. I assure you. The chemical tension was so thick you could cut it with a letter opener, but neither crossed the line. Eleanor was afraid. Afraid of the age, afraid of what people would say, afraid it was just the adrenaline of the gala, and Julian ... Julian seemed to be waiting for a sign she didn't dare to give. On Christmas Eve, the town hall ballroom was unrecognizable. It was spectacular. The vision of fusion had worked. On one side, Eleanor's leather armchairs and antique floor lamps created cozy corners. On the other, discrete screens projected illustrations of the books being read. And in the center, Julian's famous Oakbridge united both worlds. Illuminated by warm string lights, no purple, Eleanor won that battle. The people of Oakbridge filled the hall. There were older people drinking wine and young people with tattoos listening attentively. Eleanor was in the makeshift dressing room, looking in the mirror. She wore a dark green velvet dress, vintage cut, that fitted her curves and revealed her collarbones. She had let her hair down, letting soft waves fall over her shoulders. She felt ... visible. Someone knocked on the door. May I? Julian entered. Eleanor turned and her breath caught in her throat. Julian was wearing a suit. A dark suit well cut that made him look taller, broader, more ... He wasn't wearing a tie. And he wore his black Converse sneakers, but the overall effect was devastating. "Wow," he said, stopping in his tracks.
He swept his gaze up and down her, undisguised. Eleanor, you
look stunning. The Snow Queen has melted. You don't look bad yourself for a hoodie boy," she said, trying to keep her voice from shaking. "Converse with a suit? Really? It's my personal brand. Can't disappoint my fans." He approached her. The energy between them crackled. "We did it," he said softly. "Listen." From outside came the sound of applause and soft jazz music. "It wasn't a total disaster," she conceded, smiling. "You were right about the bridge? And the jazz, that's the most romantic thing you've ever said to me," he joked. "Admitting I was right. Don't get used to it." Eleanor ... Julian took a step closer. He was so close she could feel the heat radiating from him. "When this is over, I don't want to go back to being your neighbor across the street. I don't want to wave at you through the glass anymore. I want to cross the street every day." Eleanor looked up at him. The fear was still there, but the desire was stronger. "There's a problem with that," she whispered. "Which one?" "Hemingway is very territorial. I'll bribe the cat. I'm 43 years old, Julian. I have quirks. I like silence. I hate burnt coffee. I'm 31. I have too much energy. I make the best coffee in the world if you give me a chance. And I love your quirks. I love you." They went out into the hallway, ready to present the gala. They stopped under the archway to the main hall. Eleanor looked up. "Oh no, what?" Julian followed her gaze. Hanging from the arch, with a perfect red ribbon, was a sprig of mistletoe. "The mayor," Eleanor said. "That woman is a public menace." "It's a cliché, Julian. A cheap, predictable literary cliché." "I like clichés," Julian said, turning toward her.
He blocked the way. The noise of the party seemed distant.
"Clichés exist because they work, Eleanor. Because people like happy endings. Because sometimes two people who are dying to kiss need a botanical excuse to dare to do it." Eleanor looked at him. She saw the hope in his eyes. She saw the adoration. And she decided, for the first time in years, to stop reading the story and start writing it. "I don't need a botanical excuse," she said, brave. "I don't need a botanical excuse," she said, brave. She grabbed Julian by the lapels of his jacket, went up on tiptoes and pulled him down. Julian didn't hesitate. His hands went to her waist, possessive and firm, and he kissed her. It wasn't a chaste movie kiss, it was a real kiss. A kiss that tasted of champagne, of patience accumulated over weeks, of ink and promise. A kiss that mixed Eleanor's order with Julian's chaos and created something perfect. The people in the hall started to applaud. Eleanor didn't even hear them. She only felt Julian's lips and the absolute certainty that this was the best chapter of her life. 1 year later, we see Main Street in Oakbridge covered in snow again. It is Christmas. The Oak Inkwell is still there, elegant, with its warm lights. But, in the window display, next to the first edition of Dickens, there is a small, curated selection of auteur graphic novels. Across the street, page 0, now has green velvet reading armchairs, suspiciously similar to Eleanor's, and the music volume has dropped to civilized levels. The door of the inkwell opens. Eleanor comes out, locking up. She wears the same elegant coat, but now she wears a brightly colored scarf that Julian gave her. Hemingway comes out behind her, walking with dignity on the snow, wearing a small collar with a bow tie. They cross the street. There is no war. There is no trench. Julian is at the door of his shop, waiting for her, with 2 steaming cups in his hand. "You're late, partner," he says, with that smile that still makes Eleanor's knees tremble. "I was looking for this." Eleanor pulls an old book from her bag. A rare poetry edition. "For your personal collection." "Merry Christmas, Julian." Julian puts the coffees on an outdoor table, grabs her by the waist, and lifts her into the air, spinning with her under the falling snow. Eleanor laughs, a loud, free laugh that echoes in the empty street. "I love you, Eleanor Vance, and I love you, Julian the Chaotic." They enter page 0 together. Hemingway enters last, shaking the snow off his tail, and heads straight for his new favorite cushion next to the radiator. The 2 bookstores still have different names, different accounts, and different styles. But their owners have discovered that the best stories aren't the ones written alone, but the ones read aloud, with two voices, with a cup of tea and a cup of coffee on the same table. And as the camera pulls away and the Christmas lights slowly go out in the town, we know this isn't the end of the book. It's just the end of the prologue.